big mistake. I will never ever buy a phone or any other gadgets on credit again. This is me about 4 years ago, stepping my foot into the UK with big dreams as big as Big Ben itself. I was so pumped with very high hopes that I was coming to a country where I can change the trajectory of my life for good. Well, spoiler alert, my expectations were way off track. But let's save that for another time. In this video, I will share with you 7 things I wish I never did as a new immigrant in the UK, and why you should be careful not to fall into this trap if you have just moved to a new country, not just the UK. Number 7 was the craziest of all. One of the things almost every new immigrant experiences is people giving you advice, both solicited and unsolicited advice. Everyone wants to give you advice on how the country is, what you can or cannot do, how you should live, blah, blah, blah. Please don't get me wrong. Receiving advice is not bad at all, especially as a person who has just entered a new country. I think for me, what I failed to do enough of was engage in my own in-depth research before taking people's advice hook, line, and sinker. I relied too much on other people's advice without doing my own findings to understand the pros and cons in order to make informed decision. That was a big mistake. The danger of not doing your own findings very well is that you could easily start seeing the country you've just entered from the lens of other people, even if they are wrong. Sometimes people tell you things like, the country is hard, there is racism everywhere, you must try to outsmart your colleagues, don't make any friends at work because everyone at work is a snitch. Or you start hearing things like, it is extremely difficult to be rich in this country, especially if you're in the UK. In fact, I think one of the worst things you probably hear is that everyone buys stuff on credit. So don't bother saving up or anything. Just get a credit card and you'll be fine. Because what's the point? If you're not going to be rich in this country anyway, live your best life. While there may be some element of truth to this, it is not everyone's reality. It is not at all. Don't be deceived. And if you are so unfortunate enough to be surrounded by people who are not forward thinkers, people who only see the limitations in the country, then you might be setting yourself up for negativity. My point is, do not let people's limitations be projected on you. Don't let their limitations be yours. Do your own research. I can't sing this enough. Do your own research before taking any advice as the gospel. The next trend for me as a new person 4 years ago was the credit card application frenzy. Again, this is why you should do your own research when you are here. Don't just take every advice out there. Now, if you are reckless with money, I'll tell you the truth right now. You will live a life of dependence on credit card. You're going to start buying things that you don't need and then start paying back from money you should have saved for investment. And by the time you finish paying it off, something else will come your way and you would buy it, knowing fully well that you outrightly cannot afford the things you are buying. And that is how the cycle of credit card dependence continues. I have seen this happen over and over again. If I'm saying this, it's because I've been a victim of it. And looking back now, I can tell you that there were reckless decisions that I made that I would never advise anyone to try. And that's why I'm hoping that this video helps someone out there. And here's the thing. After like 1 year in the UK, many people ask themselves why they don't have any savings. Look, I don't have any problem with people getting credit cards only to use it as a means of improving their credit score towards making themselves better positions for long-term purchases like getting a mortgage on a property. But I think that most people moving into this country, for example, are introduced way too early to this reckless lifestyle of buying everything, both relevant and irrelevant things on credit card. Build your credit wisely, but avoid unnecessary debt. The next thing I wish I never did is throwing money on projects back in my home country without having any robust base in my current reality. I am not sure what I was thinking. This might be a point of debate for some people, but for me, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I believe it is better to build something solid where you are currently resident, especially if you plan on staying there for a long time. Come to think of it, I had just moved into this country then. There was no plan to leave after a short period or anything like that. Even now, after over 3 years in this country, I am not planning to return to Nigeria. So why was I in a rush to make investments at home? Look, for me, considering the situation of the Naira against the pound sterling, I didn't think it was a wise decision. We all know that the Naira keeps fluctuating, and unfortunately, if you bought land like 5 years ago in Nigeria, it's possible that even if you sold it now, on the surface, it might look as though you made profit, but with the new exchange rate now, I'm not sure it will benefit me here. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section. Let's discuss a little bit about this. But mind you, we're talking about investments here. This is not about sending money to your family or friends back home. My point here is, I think it's necessary that we build our future where we are. This next one, I must confess, it took me a while to admit to myself, and it is probably one of the worst decisions I ever made in my first year in the UK. And this was buying a car. The story behind this car thing goes like this. You know, I came into the UK during the summer, and the moment I experienced my first winter, that was when I vowed that I would never stay out in the cold again, waiting for the bus whenever I wanted to go out. I had never felt so cold and horrible in my life. So I decided that buying a car would rescue me from my misery. This may sound like a justifiable reason, right? Wait until you hear more. My house then was only a stone throw from the hospital where I work. I was literally living within the hospital environment. I lived there for about 3 years. So what I was actually using the buses for were things like going to church, buying groceries, visiting friends, and if they live far away, then I would of course use the train or use the coach. I was a single guy, for crying out loud. We have a great transport system in this city compared to some other places, of course. So you see that I could have easily endured the waiting times at the bus station or the train station. I even went further to convince myself that the reason I was buying the car was to use it and do agency shifts down the line so that I can earn some extra cash. Till date, I have not done a single shift outside my hospital. I mean, why would I? My hospital's bank shift rate was so good, and it's still good. Moreover, when I factored in the stress of traveling all over the place to do agency shifts, I personally didn't think it was worth it anyway. So essentially, the car I bought suddenly became a liability on my finances. I had to pay things like car insurance every month, fuel costs, road tax, yearly MOT test, and of course yearly servicing and repair costs. Now, did I have fun with the car? Oh yes, absolutely. It made a lot of movements very easy for me. I could go wherever I wanted without having to check the bus or train times. But at what cost? I know someone listening may be asking, but why didn't you just sell it? Well, quite a few reasons, two of which were the fact that I could have lost money on it had I sold it then for something I just bought. Secondly, the car was doing what I would call the Lord's work, because it was helping me, to pick some people, going to church and coming back. It made it easy for myself and my colleagues in church. My point though is you should really critically evaluate whether you need a car or it's just a want. Because one thing I know is one of the first things that they put in your face in this country is the need for you to buy a car, even when you really don't need it. If your city has a good bus system, and this is true of most places, most cities in the UK, why do you want to buy a car? Especially when there are other more important assets you could use the money to invest in. Nothing wrong with wants, but make sure your wants do not cost you your future goal. Buying a car seemed logical to me to avoid the cold, but it became a financial burden. Now, the next thing I was not proud of is buying the latest iPhone then on credit. I don't know why the average immigrant, and permit me for lack of a better word, but I'm an immigrant in this country. But I think that the average immigrant wants to change their phone as soon as they get into this country. And they're not changing it to buy the latest phone with cash. Like, it's not something that they already have money to afford. They'll rather use credit card or buy the phone from all these service providers, like I did. I also bought other gadgets on credit, but that was a big mistake. And till tomorrow, I will never, ever buy a phone or any other gadgets on credit again. You know how the saying goes, fool me once. You see, when these service providers give you these things on credit to repay over 24 months, they normally start with an amount that is so easy to pay. What I refuse to pay close attention to, even though I knew about it, is the fact that every April of each year, they increase your repayment in line with inflation and also in line with Bank of England's interest rates. Actually, the increase is normally above the inflation rate even. This is how I knew that these guys were not looking out for anybody's interest, but how to enrich themselves. Now let's do a little bit of calculation. I bought my iPhone in 2021. This iPhone was released sometime in September 2021, and I got it in November of that same year. Now, if you count 24 months, which is usually the length of time that, most of them allow because they are crooks, then you know that I was going to run into 2 April months before the end of my contract. Moo me. But of course, I just wanted the phone. Everyone around me had either an iPhone or the latest Samsung, and I could afford to pay the monthly payment, so why not? Anyways, let's do the maths. I paid 111 as initial deposit. Then I started paying £75 up until March of 2022. Then the price jumped to £82 every month for the next 12 months. Then in April of last year, which is 2023, my greatest shock, the amount skyrocketed to £93 and stayed there until the end of my contract in October 2023. Now, if you add everything up, it's amounting to over £2,000. Bro, how much was a phone if I had patiently saved and bought it with cash? But that's not the real question. The real question is, did I really need a new phone at that point in my life? A phone I couldn't afford? I will ask you the same question. Do you really need that latest phone you're about to buy, or that latest computer gadget you're about to buy on credit? Even if it's with cash, do you really need it, or it's just a want? Please learn from my mistake. Avoid unnecessary debt and think long term. Think long term. The next iPhone will come. I have iPhone 13 Pro Max. We have iPhone 15 now, and this year probably iPhone 16 is coming out. Of course, if the reason you are buying the latest phone is to start something like maybe a YouTube channel and you want a phone that has a good camera, maybe you can justify it. But don't just buy things randomly because everyone else is doing it. Anyways, let's move on. Not focusing on saving for a house in my first year was a major thing I wish I did not do. Every time I think or talk about this, it makes me really sad. The point I talked about earlier about investing back home without a proper base where you are was the real reason I could never focus on saving up properly for a house here in this country. And bro, let me not lie, I had money. When you're new to a country and you're a single guy, you can live as frugal as possible and you are earning good money. I wasn't wealthy, that's not what I'm saying, but I had money that I could have diligently saved. If I had saved for 2 years from the day I entered the UK, I would have had enough to buy something reasonable, because house prices then were not as high as what we have now in 2024. So perhaps I would have bought my own apartment like 2 years ago, which would be appreciating by now. During the COVID period, when health workers were allowed to work as many hours as they wanted without restriction, right? I was working back to back on some weeks. If I knew better and followed through with a proper savings plan, I'm sure by now I would probably be thinking of buying a house that I will rent out to people, which I guess makes me what you call a landlord. Think long term, bro. And finally, being too loud. When you grow up in an environment where the only set of people who are deemed fit to own an iPhone or anything Apple are supposed to be fraudsters or corrupt politicians, then you can imagine the feeling when you find yourself in a different place where high-end phones are not really a luxury. It's what everybody has access to. I find that the average working class new immigrant in this country, in this UK, wants to change their phone to whatever the latest gadget is. Not necessarily because they need it, but because they want it to speak volume to people they left back at home. I mean, how about the designer clothes that you could only find on people who were considered to be rich back home? But now you're in the UK, you're in a place where you can do buy now, pay later, and where you can actually pick shifts at work for the sole purpose of impressing people and impressing friends and family on Instagram. You create the illusion that you have made it. Wow. And then suddenly everyone believes that you must be rich now. Then when they ask for some assistance and you can't help, it becomes a ridiculous irony. Like, how can you not have? You must be very stingy if you have all these gadgets and you show off these designer clothes online. And you even already have a car within 6 months to 1 year in the UK, but you can't assist with just 50,000 naira. Now you see how quickly 50,000 naira can become ordinary 50,000 naira when it is associated with you. But you and I know that you are trying to get on your feet in this new country. Maybe, just maybe, if everyone lived their life without the need to show off or feel among, you might find that some of the things we struggle to buy, we won't need to get them. Life is in stages. And when the real time comes for you to be able to afford those expensive, unnecessary things without struggle, without using credit card or loan, without giving a false appearance that you are rich when you are actually deceiving yourself and everyone else around you, then you should buy them, not living a fake life. Don't get caught up in showing off. Focus on your goals and ignore the noise. Word. There is so much noise. Focus on your goals. Remember, there is time for everything. I really hope we can all build something tangible as immigrants in any country you find yourself. If you found this video inspiring, please smash the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Let's meet in the comment section. I really want us to discuss what are your thoughts on what I just shared, and I'll see you in the next video.